Welcome back. In the previous step, we implemented a before aspect. In this step, we'll look at something called a after aspect. One of the things I would want to do is rename this. It should be user access aspect. Let's go ahead and do that quickly. Please go ahead and do that. I'm sure nothing would have broken. Now what I would want to do is take this and copy it, and I would want after, I'll call this after AOP aspect. Now let's start with removing the comments which are present in here just to make everything clear. So instead of add before, if you would want to do something after the value is returned, then we can use something called after returning. So import after returning, and I would want to intercept the business calls only. So I'll not worry about the data. So I'll say I'll want to intercept the business calls, and I would want also after returning, actually I can get the return value also. So what I would do is, this is the default argument. So now it's no longer the default because I would need to pass in one more parameter to the annotation. So I would need to configure it with one more argument. So what we'll do is we'll set value is equal to this, and I'll type in a comma in here, and over here I can actually type in returning is equal to, you can put the name of the argument, so where the result value will come into. So I would say string result. Actually it would be object result because we don't know the type. So returning is equal to result. What would happen is the value which is returned will be mapped to this, and what we'll do is change this. So this is no longer allowed execution. This is after. So let's change the method. The method name is not really important. You can call it anything. But if I would want to keep it consistent, so we can say this join point, oops, this join point, oops, again, this join point returned with value this, and the second argument I would want to pass in is the result. So what we are doing here is very simple, right? So we are doing after returning. So let's change it to after returning. Oops, after returning, and we are saying value is equal to the point cut which needs to be used to intercept, and I would want to take the result and put it into this argument named result. So this is the name of the argument in here. Now I'm doing a logger.info to print the result. Let's see what would happen. Oops, let's run this from here. You can see that this is being printed. So calculate something returned with value dow1. So we are intercepting the call after it has completed. So after execution, it is returning with the value dow1. After execution, here the business is returning with a value dow2. So we are printing after returning. So the thing is, after returning will get executed only when the execution gets completed successfully. So if you want to intercept an exception, then you can use another one called after throwing. This would intercept any exceptions that are thrown. So what I can do is actually after throwing, if you go in there, you would see that there's a point cut and there is a throwing. So I can get the result of the exception and say it in here. So throwing is equal to exception, and I can add an argument exception, and this is after throwing. The last kind of after interception is the common one. So whether it's throwing an exception or returning a value, you can use the after annotation to intercept that. So I can say at after, import that in, and this is after, and join point. There would not be any exception for this because you don't know whether there's a return value or the exception, so you cannot get that in here. So this is completed, or you can call it after execution of join point. So if you run it, you would see that this also gets executed. One of the important things that we discussed in this video are what are the things you can do with an after aspect. So we used after returning, after throwing, after annotations to define different methods for doing something after a method is called. The after returning is called when a method executes successfully. After throwing is called when a method throws an exception. After is called in both the scenarios, whether it's throwing an exception or returning a value. In both the scenarios, the after annotation, the method which is annotated with at after annotation will be called. Until the next step, bye bye.